Hi everyone, I'm Megan Jowert and I chose to do my conflict analysis report on standardized testing within the education system and the debate that is happening over that. The debate's been going on for plenty of years, and the triggering event of that was the No Child Left Behind Act that went into place in 2001, which basically just stated that standardized testing would be mandated to make sure that students are reaching achievement levels and that teaching methods are being effective. And it's a good way for schools and parents and districts and everyone within the education system to track school success and, make sure that students are reaching where they're supposed to be and that everything is happening how it's supposed to be. Standardized tests are also a cost-effective way to do that. It doesn't cost a lot of money to print the tests, print the Scantrons, grade them. It's a simple and cost-effective process. I chose to do my report on this because I'm an education major and it's a pretty hot topic within education courses and schools, everything. Every year standardized testing is a huge thing, and it's something schools spend, all year preparing for, teachers spend all year thinking about and preparing for, which is kind of part of the debate. Is parents feel and other teachers feel that you have to teach to the test in order for students to reach those achievement levels that they're aiming for. So that's part of the argument. But in my analysis, I talked about the effects and the different pros and cons. It's kind of a complicated conflict because each party, both parents, teachers, educators that are against the test, and then people that are for the test, along with policymakers in Congress, they each have research and studies to back their points, which I think is really interesting because on one hand of things, there's research to prove that the tests are effective and that students are achieving more because of the tests. But on the other hand, there's also research that shows that the tests are more stressful and actually cause students to fail or feel like they're failing within school, and that the tests don't actually show the true achievement of students within schools. So I thought that was really interesting that there's really research and studies to prove both sides of things, and so it kind of made it hard to find unbiased information. So that was a huge part of the conflict, and of course solving it is because there's really no true right study proven answer. So basically the solution would be finding a compromise or allowing students to opt out of testing if they want, or just finding a different method altogether, which would take a lot of planning and communication, which isn't currently happening within the conflict. There's been protests and boycotts all across the nation, and some states are allowing students to opt out of testing, but there's only 3 states and maybe a handful of districts that are allowing that, and the majority are still mandating the standardized testing regardless of what boycotts or protests are happening. Another huge thing I talked about was the power struggle between both sides, because really it's community members going against Congress and policymakers and people who have a lot of power and say in education. So that's a huge factor in the conflict. There's gonna be a need for a lot of numbers with the community members in order for Congress and policymakers to see that the conflict is even happening. And so that plays a really interesting role. Another thing I talked about was how emotions really do play a huge role in this conflict. Really what drives most of it is parents' emotions for their students and wanting the best for their children and not agreeing with the methods that are happening within schools to prepare students for the test and how long it takes their students to take the test. I think it's averaged that 9 hours or more a year students spend just taking the test, which is kind of crazy to expect, young students to sit still and take a test for that long. So, it's a very emotionally driven conflict because parents' emotions, teachers' emotions, and students' emotions are all involved in it. And one of the recommendations I had for making the conflict smoother or potentially solving it would be to just open up the means of communication and having, educated meetings about standardized testing and the pros and cons of it, and really just allowing parents and students and teachers to voice their opinions on it and watch that travel up through the system. And also potentially signing petitions and getting more notice to higher up, since it's a conflict that needs to go higher up. But anyways, yeah.